Hi, welcome to SoundSense, building a home-based recording studio. I'm the Mike at michaelbearvoice.com. Today I'm going to do a thing that I have looked forward to with pleasure for a very long time. Even if I did nothing else in this space, I would have wanted to do this one thing, which is to replace the old single-glazed double-hung window with two new larger windows. Not only is this going to provide me much greater daylight, but because these are casement windows and I can crank them open fully, they're going to provide me with fresh air and a great airflow through this house. My old window would only open maybe a matter of 12 to 14 inches, and so it was quite stuffy in this attic. So these windows are going to really help. Daylight, fresh air. We call this the problem solver. My friend Kent is here today to help me put in these two windows. It's a big day, I can't wait. So I've removed that cladding and the insulation, and this area is now ready for windows. The challenge is going to be to figure out the framing, because the way that these studs are framed, these studs go down to the top plate of the floor below versus having a bottom plate on a stud wall of their own. So once we figure out the framing and how we're actually going to make that happen, it should be pretty straightforward. It wasn't until much later that I figured out that the odd framing was in fact a variation on an old style, popular in the early part of the 19th century, called balloon framing. What I had expected was what you could expect in any modern home, which is platform framing, in which any new wall starts on the floor beneath your feet with a bottom plate and studs and etc., etc. Balloon framing, on the other hand, could send studs soaring through 2 floors or more, and joists would be side nailed to the studs, and the joist would rest on a ledger board. It seemed like a really complicated way of building, and it was not something I'd ever seen before. We determined that this was a variation on that framing, in which the joists on this floor were placed on the top plate of the wall below, and the studs side nailed into those joists. We safely cut through the 3 short studs below the window in order to place a bottom plate across the floor joists, which would carry our window framing as it would in platform framing. Once we determined the required new opening and installed doubled king studs to take the load off, we removed the old window, lead weights and all. Perfect, look at that. We then cut the old king studs from the original window framing at a height that would take the new window header and the window sill plate. We needed to cut through the nails that held the siding to these studs, of course, before they could come out.
Do you want to hide?
So you can see we've cut away the old framing. We've installed the framing for 2 new 23 by 38 windows roughly. So now we have to cut away the exterior sheathing that's left over on the inside of this particular framing. And then we can put in the two windows, each of which are double glazed, which is going to help with sound reduction certainly.
It works.
So, as you can see, we got the windows in, and now it's just a question of stuffing those gaps, which of course were necessary to shim them in order to level them and make sure that they were plumb, etc., etc. So they are drilled through the side jambs into the studding that we put in. It's time now basically to jam those gaps full of rock wool insulation, and for those areas that are a little tight, I've got foam that I'll squeeze in there. And then of course, then I can start actually insulating the rest of this wall where I open it up for the framing. Once the windows went in, I had to patch up the outside of the house siding since the old window was taller. So I'm just perched outside on my porch roof, outside the windows we put in yesterday. I've used my skill saw to cut away the siding in a 3-inch gap, you might say, or a 3-inch run all the way around the window. I'm going to crib a piece of material in there, and then onto that, I will nail my trims. By the way, all of the wood for this came from the flooring I had taken up, which was 3/4 inch tongue and groove fir. I simply had to cut any piece I needed to size on my table saw. I custom cut some siding pieces that I had salvaged from the room demolition and filled the gaps. I made a new sill for the window and cut a slight bevel on the backside to allow for proper water runoff, as you would normally. And this is the finished window. The windows are in, yes, but the greater part of this build is yet to happen in an episode further down the road. I didn't really have a plan going in. I only knew that I wanted to provide another layer of glass, as I understood that a triple glazed window is going to provide greater acoustic isolation than a double glazed window. So I knew I wanted to put more glass on the inside of the room in front of these two new windows. But I wasn't sure how I was going to do it. I knew that I wanted them to be movable in some way. So I mulled that design and build over as I carried on with the rest of the build. And I knew that I would get back to it eventually. And I did, and I will. But that's for a further episode of Sound Sense, further down the road. For now, the windows are in.
I'm here with Michael Baer tonight after the momentous putting in of the windows. Mike, how important was it to get those windows in tonight?
Oh, getting the windows in was real key, Alex. You can't leave a hole in your house like that. You get rodents coming in, you get a murder of crows, a flock of seagulls, God knows what. So you really got to button that up. You really got to get those windows in. You can't leave a hole in your house. It's important.
Absolutely. And momentous night for Kent as well. How important was it to have Kent today?
Oh, Kenty was big for us. He was huge. He was key. He puts the winning windows out. He doesn't talk a lot in the room, but give him a fistful of shims and a 4-foot level. There's nobody better, Real key for Kenty out there today. Real helpful. Real good.
And now that the windows are in, what's next for the team?
Well, we're going to enjoy this just a little bit, maybe pop a cold one. But we're going to look at some footage, going to do some breakdown, see where we need to go next. And I think on Sound Sense, that's going to be back into the attic. We got to get that space buttoned up. We got to get it tidied up and cleaned up. We got to insulate, do some vapor barrier and that kind of thing, make it warm and dry. And we can move on. I think that's the next step on Sound Sense, though, next time out.
Well, congratulations. Thanks, Mike.
All right, thank you.